friends, and welcome to the Montessori Mission. 10 Montessorians, 10 questions, and 10 perspectives from 10 different communities. Here today for episode 7, I have the wonderful Pilar Bewley with me from Mainly Montessori. And any of you who follow me on Instagram and who follow my IGTVs, my Top Tip Tuesday on a Tuesday evening, will recognize Pilar as a familiar face, as she has been so kind to be a regular guest, talking to us about the elementary child and understanding the intricacies of moving from the first plane to the second plane. And she's been such a huge support for me as a friend and also as a colleague, as a Montessorian, to sort of work out this new stage with Olivia and also just work out the intricacies of life as well, not only as a Montessorian, but just the ebb and flow of life in general. Pilar is just so calm. She's a really good person to talk to. So if you don't know Pilar, let me introduce her first of all. She is a 3 to 6 and a 6 to 12 Montessori guide, AMI guide, and so that is primary and elementary. She firstly, I believe, did a master's in Montessori education, and she was a Montessori child who rediscovered the joy and beauty of Montessori when she was 30. What else can I say? She's also a positive discipline educator. That's for the classroom and for families at home. And she has an incredible resource on mainlymontessori.com called the Homeschooling Hub. And actually, to let you all in on a secret, this summer I participated in Pilar's Homeschooling Hub retreat. Over the summer. It was an 8-week course, and we had weekly Zoom calls, there was videos, there was homework, there was downloadables. And even though I'm not a homeschooler, my children are in a fantastic Montessori school here in Dubai, I found the resources within the hub and on the course to be of such value, whether or not you're homeschooling, and actually whether or not your children are in a Montessori setting, or even if you know anything about Montessori, because it was the information was given was of such value and so universal just to children. You don't need to be a Montessorian or to be practicing in a Montessori school to be able to take value from it. And that's what I found was really, really enriching from it. There was so much richness, and the calls were brilliant because everyone always asked a question that you had in the back of your mind but couldn't find the right words to get out and ask on live on screen. So it was a really, really wonderful experience. So if you have the opportunity to do one of Pilar's courses, I would really, really recommend doing so. It was really, really great and gave me so much so many insights of how I can make my home even more accessible to my children, not necessarily physically because they're 4 and 6 now and they can do most of their own things, but mainly sort of emotionally, how can I set things up for them in a way that they can succeed emotionally so that they can express themselves in a more effective way. So I can express myself in a way that's more loving and more kind and in a way that's going to speak to them more powerfully. So thank you, Pilar. It was a really, really great experience this summer. And thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me and for that lovely introduction. I'm just so thrilled to be here. I love how we've connected across the oceans halfway around the world. And this opportunity is just so dear to my heart. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. And I can't wait to hear with your experience as a Montessori child and all of your classroom experience and homeschooling experience. Also for anyone who isn't aware, who's watching, Pilar homeschools both of her children, who are both in the second plane, so between the ages of 6 and 12. I think one's 6 and one's 9, that's right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Pilar has got such a unique perspective to share with us of a lot of classroom experience, and then 3 years homeschool experience as well.
This is
right?
Yeah, we're going into our 4th year this year.
Going to the 4th year. So it's for a sort of well-rounded view of what Montessori can look like. Pilar is gonna give us that today. So I'm really, really thrilled that she's here. Thank you so much. And shall we dive in? If you both feel ready. Yeah, I feel ready. So for question 1 of the Montessori Mission, Pilar, I would love to know, what does Montessori mean to you?
Well, it's meant a lot of things over the years, but what I come back to is that it is a way of knowing myself and of knowing children, of understanding who I am, how I respond, how I see the world, but also understanding the path that my children are walking. And I think that we get so many conflicting messages from the outside world, from society, as to what children should be doing, what parents should be, how parents should be acting. And what Montessori gives me is the freedom and the trust to say, what you need to know is already inside you. You just need to find it from inside yourself. And what your children need is already inside them, right? And that's what I think Dr. Montessori discovered when she was observing the children. And that's one of the reasons that she speaks about the secret of childhood, is that children already have that inside of them that will guide their development. And so to me, that's the core of Montessori. And it never ends, because you're always growing and evolving, and your children are too. So it just never ends. It just kind of builds on each stage of growth.
Yeah, that's so wonderful and so true. It's this spiral, isn't it? Like our knowledge starts here, and then sort of every year or 6 months or whatever the cycle is, we kind of go deeper on it. We sort of understand it in a slightly different perspective. I can't really explain it, but you know what I mean. You kind of, the same thing comes around, but you understand it on a deeper level, or a richer level, or something like that happens, isn't it? With our own self-knowledge, and then our knowledge about our children. And as you say, Dr. Montessori, just the gift she gave us was telling us to trust our inner wisdom, or accessing our inner wisdom.
Exactly. And I think the spiral curriculum, like the spiral that you say, that spiral curriculum where you're able to put the children back in touch with the same concepts, but at a more abstract and more complex level, that's kind of a micro reflection of our greater experience as human beings, where we kind of go back to the same experiences, right? Or the same, we follow a path, but each time we're able to bring our prior experiences to it. And so we see it with new eyes, just like an older child will see the same topic with new eyes. The more we work with children and the more we work on ourselves, the more we see them and we see ourselves with new eyes, right? Because we bring those experiences with us. Yeah. So that's what I love about Montessori, that it's very reflective of the human experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It goes way beyond math and language.
Yeah. It's funny because we were speaking before we started the recording, weren't we, about actually personal growth and intense periods of growth, and we said exactly what it is. Whenever we're going through something, it's the universe or whoever is sort of presenting us this is our cosmic plan, and it's for us to either resolve it or at least go into it a little bit deeper and understand it from a different perspective, a different dimension that's been added to it now. And as you said, that's the same for us, it's the same for our children, it's the same for everyone, isn't it? We have our path to travel, and I think as parents, Montessori parents, it gives us that trust to allow our children to open in that way, I guess, rather than, as you said, there's so much pressure of what's going on outside. But Montessori hopefully gives us this gift of every time coming back to, okay, what does my child need in this moment? I know that you've said we need A, B, and C, or society says you need to do D, E, and F, but actually, what if I can see my child, I know what she or he needs in this moment. That's
yes,
gift.
Absolutely. The trust that Montessori allows you to have in your child is really powerful, but also the trust that Montessori allows you to have in yourself. Like, to me, that is like one of my main missions is helping adults trust themselves.
Yeah.
Because most of us were not trusted when we were little, and, through no fault of our parents, right? They were also just, victims of a system. But if we can be the cycle breakers, that could be so powerful. And Montessori allows us to be the cycle breakers because it allows you to know that you're not alone, right? That you're working with your child's inner development. You have a partner in this. Yeah. And so when you start trusting that you're not alone, then you're better able to trust yourself, because if you see that your child has an inner drive, right, then you start understanding that you do too. You start understanding that you have an instinct and an awareness that you need to quiet all of those external voices. And then when you do, the truth of, who you are and that connection between you and the child becomes more evident. And Montessori allows you to do that. It kind of gives you a framework to say, here's how to do it. So it's so powerful. It's
comes back
so
to the
remarkable
every time, doesn't it? The connection every single time.
It does. It's all about
in a time before we knew what we know now about neuroscience and the importance of connection rather than correction, and the old school method of discipline. She was such a visionary in what she was saying, with rewards and punishments. And it's so funny that when we're in this Montessori world for an extended period of time, we forget actually the rest of the world isn't like how we do things. It's a real shock to me that when someone says that, they got their child a sticker chart to like eat their broccoli or something, and I'm just like, really, does anyone do that anymore? Yes. I like kind of, that makes me think of like the 1980s, but actually no, it's still quite prevalent actually. Yes. And in schools, there's some mainstream schools that still practice, like certificate for being kind, for example, or which is just the worst the worst thing to do something extrinsic for something that's come from the internal motivation of the child is just like screwing everything up, isn't it? Yes. But it's so funny to observe it, isn't it? And then we think, okay, there we can make a difference, and it just allows our child to blossom, and we can blossom as well. So
and I'm glad that you said, when you were talking about the retreat that we did this summer, how it's, it's really not about, if you want to homeschool with Montessori, or if you're sending your child to a Montessori school. Montessori is, or should be, for everyone, right? It should just be a birthright for parents and children to have this knowledge. And don't call it Montessori. She never wanted it to be called the Montessori method, right? So don't call it that. Just have the information out there. Yeah,
so true. That's what our mission is, isn't it? With all the work that we do, to just like, someone in one of the previous podcasts, I can't remember who it was, I think it was episode 6, Aziza said about democratizing Montessori, and that's really what it is, isn't it? Like making it truly accessible. When we think of the refugee experience, for example, and underprivileged areas, and really getting it in place to the people who need it the most. That's like, as you say, it should be everyone's birthright. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to, oh, this is going to be a really great one because you're a Montessori child as well. Question 2, please, Pilar. What was your first light bulb moment on your Montessori journey?
Well, I would love to say that, it was when I was a child, but to me, like Montessori was just what I knew, right? So it wasn't anything, transcendent in my childhood. I didn't know that other children went to schools where children weren't respected and where, children with learning differences were treated like everybody else. To me, it was just normal. But what really led me back to Montessori, well, actually, like what really convinced me that Montessori was the path was during my first observation. So I arrived back to the Montessori world, not really even knowing why I was there. I was 30 and I had a successful wedding planning business. I was making a lot of money, but I wasn't feeling like I was contributing to the world in a way that I wanted to, right? As a Montessori child, that you kind of have this in you that you want to give back, right, to the world. And so I sat down to meditate and just kind of put out this question: what should I do with my life? And a voice came to me and said, you need to work with children. And I remember opening my eyes and being like, wait a second, I don't even really like children. I knew I wanted to have children. Yeah. I knew I wanted to have children, but I saw children like the world sees children, like most of the developed world sees children, right? They're loud, they're obnoxious, they're rude, they're messy. And so I thought, why would I want to work with children? But this voice wouldn't leave me alone. And so I talked to my husband, who was then my fiance, and he said, well, you always talk about your childhood in Montessori, and so why don't you start there? So I found the AMI training center was across the street from his house, which was, the first sign. And so I went to talk to the director, and it turns out the director was from Mexico City, and her daughter and I had gone to high school together.
No.
Yes, it was crazy. And so
crazy coincidence.
It was wild. So I was like, okay, let me join this course. And it was like right before the course started, a couple of weeks before it started. And so I joined, honestly, not even knowing why I was there. I was still running my business. I was just there to kind of learn and see what happened. And when you're doing your training, you do observations, right? You sit down and you watch the children working, and you try to see them with the eyes of a scientist, just objectively, without jumping to any conclusions. And so I was observing this little girl who was 4, and she was sitting down working with a metal inset. And then when she was done, she stood up and she put all her materials on a tray, and she very carefully took the tray and returned all the materials to the shelf. And, now I say it and I realize, like, all children are capable of doing that. But when I saw that for the first time, her composure, her poise, her self-discipline at the age of 4, this tiny child, it blew me away. It allowed me to see what children were truly capable of, and how misinterpreted their behaviors are, how little value we place on their development, on their potential, right? And so to me, that was my aha moment, my light bulb moment that led me down the path. And, I'm not going to say, obviously, that it's all been, puppies and unicorns, because we have conditioning, right? We have a lot of conditioning. I had, 30 some years of conditioning that I had to work through. but I've never forgotten this little child and the impact that she had on my life.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. And 4-year-olds are so powerful in that way, aren't they? Because they are such, I see that with Harry, my son, who's 4, and that sense of order and that sense of precision and needing everything to be, absolutely perfect in that way is so powerful. And you see that inner drive. And there's something about 4-year-olds that are just, it's magnetic to watch, isn't it? Yeah,
they really are. It's like they're coming into their own. You know, they're coming into their body, they're realizing their potential. You know, Dr. Montessori said the first 3 years, the child is an unconscious creator, right? And then around the age of 3, they become this conscious worker. And so at the age of 4, all of that is really solidifying. And they're at the like the pinnacle of the first plane. Right. The second plane tendencies aren't coming in yet, but the first plane tendencies are so well developed at that point. And I think that's what makes them so powerful. They have, you know, they have a drive to work. They have this absorbent mind. You know, they're so right capable. In the middle. They're so capable, and they're right in the middle of all their.
He can do all the things that I can do. He's just a smaller person. Like, he can cook a meal. He can put the washing on, he can do the ironing, he's in the workshop sawing pieces of wood and hammering, and he's mending the hoover when it broke, and he changed a fuse in the fan the other day when it blew. Like, he can do the things an adult can do, but he's just miniature, and it's like, it's mad, as you said. And I love how you said that, the pinnacle of the first plane. That's amazing.
Yeah, they really are. And if you look at the sensitive periods, right, you know how they, you know, some of them start at 2 and end at 6 and everything. At 4, they're right smack in the middle of all the sensitive periods for the first plane. So it's this remarkable period of growth. And I think with it comes a lot of frustration if they're not given that space and that ability to express themselves. And so that's where, you know, a lot of the misconceptions lie. You know, and so that's
and this where the impulse control isn't quite there yet. Like, with Harry, he's very, very physical, and so he'll come and give you a bear hug and knock you to the ground and stuff like that. So because his impulse control isn't there yet. So it's really easy to, you know, as you say, misunderstand what's going on, you know. But then when you see him doing all these other amazing things, you're like, actually, no, this is what's happening. I shared on my stories a couple of weeks ago last week, when they're preparing to go back to school next week, and they wanted to count all their socks. So Harry lined up all of his socks in pairs on the floor. Olivia, second plane child, just literally emptied the whole drawer onto the floor. And she's like, "Oh, I've got enough," and then just put them back in again. And Harry laid, I think it was like 9 pairs of socks, like in precision. Like, it was just so funny. To see how what he was like. I mean, he's very precise anyway, much more than Olivia ever was. But it's just, as you say, just when we observe them, we just get it. When we observe them, we just get it, don't we? Yeah.
I mean, I think
we won't get it.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, there has to be an education for adults, right? People have to know what to look for, right? You cannot see something that you don't know is there. And so that's where the education piece lies, and the humility has to be there on the part of the adult to say, I don't know everything about this child in front of me, you know, and I want to learn. I want to be able to support them, and therefore I'm going to educate myself on what they're truly capable of. And once you do, it just becomes so enjoyable, doesn't it? It just becomes fun to see, like, oh yes, there's that tendency to, you know, for perfection, or, you know, there's that need to communicate. And so when you know what you're looking at, you're much better able to understand those impulses that you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And so question 3, please. In what ways does Montessori enrich the work that you do?
Oh goodness, it's my whole life. You know, I was when I was reading your questions, I was thinking like how Montessori influences what I do. And I don't think that there's an area of my life that hasn't been touched by it. But in general, it's really allowed me to have a friendliness with error. Right. And I'm very much a person that likes to create new things, that likes to start projects and get out there. And I don't know everything when I start. And so I think Montessori allows us to have that beginner mind of just taking on new ventures and being okay with making mistakes and honoring mistakes as opportunities for learning. Right. I love your cat. So so great. And one thing that Montessori has really done for me is that it rekindled my love of learning, because I went to a traditional school when I was in the 4th grade. There were no elementary schools in the city where I moved to. And so I went to a traditional school as of the 4th grade. And I always enjoyed school and it was fine, but I definitely fell prey to the model of, you know, you have to learn this because it's on the test and because you need to get into college, and, you know, and everything is kind of an extrinsic goal, right? There's like, you learn for the sake of moving to the next stage, not just for the joy of learning. And when I took especially my elementary training in Italy, it was for me, it was rediscovering just the joy of learning for its own sake. And so, for example, I would just move to a new house out in the country, and we have a bunch of different trees. And so when we got here, my first drive was to identify all the trees. I just wanted to know what they were, what their scientific name was, and, you know, how they reproduced, and it was just for the sake of knowing, just for the sake of learning. There was no test. There was no, you know, it was just for the sake of learning. And in my work with parents, I find that some parents are able to rediscover that when they're homeschooling, right? And I love that about Montessori, that it really brings people back to the core of learning just for the joy of it. I think the last thing that comes to mind right now is really planting the seeds, right? In elementary classrooms, or, you know, when you work with elementary children, the idea is not that you are teaching for them to memorize and regurgitate. What you're doing is you're scattering, you're broadcasting seeds of knowledge, of culture, and you are trusting, right? Going back to that idea of trust, you're trusting that they're going to take hold in the child's mind, and that the right ones, the ones that the child needs, are going to start to grow. And sometimes that growth happens immediately. Sometimes the growth happens into the adolescent years. But that's not for us to determine, right? And the same thing I've found applies to my work with parents, because when I first started sharing and you know, recording and creating everything that I do, I was really concerned about whether or not the parents were going to understand what I was saying, whether it was going to make sense, and whether it's going to work for them. And I realized that I cannot control that. Just like I cannot control what the children learn, I cannot control what the parents learn. And so my approach has shifted towards broadcasting seeds, broadcasting my experience, the wisdom that the children have shared with me over the years, and, you know, sharing it, you know, paying it forward, and trusting that what each parent needs is what they're going to take. And it's worked really well in terms of like, it's released me from the pressure of being perfect, you know, going back to that friendliness with error. And it's also allowed parents to just take what resonates with them at that particular point in time and not feel pressured about understanding everything perfectly the first time.
I love that. I love that analogy about the seeds and not having the need to check up on them, but just trusting that we have planted them. And like, we don't plant something in the winter and then dig it up every 2 weeks to see what's going on. We just trust that in April or early May, then something's going to happen, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
We don't have to check up. But as you said, from the beginning, it's all about trusting that we are enough, trusting that our children are enough, and we are all on this cosmic path, and whatever is the right thing will reveal itself to us or to the child, as long as we can get out the way and just trust whatever to come forth. Yeah, exactly. I love that. I love the analogy of the seeds. I'm gonna use that, I think, with parents. I love it.
Good. I hope so. It is really powerful.
So question 4, please, Pilar. When was the first time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know? And that either from a direct interaction or just from an observation. The first time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know.
Oh, goodness. Well, I always thought that when I finished my training, right, my primary training, that, that I would be prepared and that I would be, ready to be a teacher, right? Because you come in with so much kind of ego, right? Yes. And my first year as a primary guide was the most, tremendous kick in the butt, ever. And those children, bless their hearts, they had to deal with a brand new guide who'd never even worked with children before. So it was such a learning journey for all of us. And I don't know if this anecdote that I'm going to share is like, truly the first time, because when you're in a classroom, the children are reflecting back to you every single moment, the things that you have to work on. And, if you're open to seeing it, it's just, I used to say that, I don't go to church because working with children is my spiritual practice, right? They reflect, they reflect back to you everything. They are your spiritual gurus. But there was this one incident that really broke me. So I was working at a school that was, the director had a lot of pressure from the parents, from the investors, and from herself to create kind of this, perfect Montessori environment. And so there was a lot of pressure from the top towards the teachers. And what happens in schools like that is that the pressure from the top goes to the teachers, and then the teachers obviously unconsciously deflect it towards the students, right? Yes. It's just human nature to do that. Yeah. And especially if you're a new guide and you don't have the spiritual grounding yet. Yeah. And so the children bear the brunt of it, and they have nobody to deflect it to. Right. And they're such, just kind of such pure and raw little spiritual beings that they take that on. And I had a student, she was 4, again, these 4-year-old miraculous beings. She was 4, and she made a drawing at home, and she brought it to school. And she said, I made a drawing of the school. And I looked at the drawing expecting it to be, all flowers and sunshine and beautiful. And it was this building, and there was a child inside a barred window, right? And there was a bubble coming out of the window, and it just said, no, 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 no. And I saw that, and it broke my heart, because in that one drawing was reflected my approach to trying to create the classroom that I thought I had to have, right? That it had to look like a certain way, but instead of going about it in a positive way, right? Creating the conditions that would allow for normalization to happen, for peaceful, joyful environment to happen, I was saying, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. And it had turned into this classroom of no's. And this child, through her drawing, allowed me to see that. And it just transformed everything inside me. Like, it broke everything inside of me. Like, I had to apologize to her, to myself, like allow the guilt to come through, allow, friendliness with error to come through, and to really understand that we're not going to get to where we want to go by saying no to everything, right? By removing everything we don't want, but instead by encouraging what we do want. And so that child was kind of the catalyst for a lot of growth. And she was 4, and
story.
Yeah. And from then there's been, countless examples, just countless. Every day, these children are transforming us and leading the way.
Yeah. I love that story. Wow. But as you say, how heartbreaking, and also in your first year as well, because I remember my first year and it was a disaster. Because as you say, you kind of rock up all puffed up thinking you know what's what. Oh my goodness, we know nothing about anything.
Exactly. And it's, it's one of those things where you think, like, I don't want my child to have a first year guide. But at the same time, every first year guide has to start somewhere, right? And so has to start with a group of children. And so, it's really difficult, right? And I think there needs to be so much more mentorship of first and second year guides, and so much more guidance. And there's so much that needs to change, but
putting a guide in at the deep end.
It's cruel for everyone, and doesn't set anybody up for success. But I think there has to be a better way to do it.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that, actually. I thought it was just me that had a nightmare in their first year.
No, everyone. And my son had a first year guide in his first year of primary, and it created a lot of trauma that we're still working through. And and I was angry at that guide and at that school for a long time, until I remembered that I was a first year guide too, and I made many mistakes too. And so it's one of those things where it's like, what do you do? Everybody needs to start somewhere, but the importance of mentorship cannot be understated.
That's such a good point. I feel like you might be a visionary for that, Pilar. I think you would be such a good person to sort of take that forward, the mentorship. I really do.
I don't know. I struggle with the associations and the bureaucracy within them. And I think some schools do brilliantly in terms of mentoring their guides, and other schools are still working towards understanding the importance of that. So I don't know, we'll see. It might be a path for the future.
I guess some schools, the main difference would be some schools remember what it's like and some schools don't remember what it's like. Basically, the principal either remembers or doesn't remember how hard it was in the first year, and that basically will trickle down to the experience that the first year guide has. So the experience that the support that she or he will need, in that classroom in that first year. Yeah. If we remember how painful it was, then we're more likely to offer support or mentorship, aren't we? Yeah.
Exactly. Very good point.
Wow. Good point. I love that story. Oh my goodness, the no. Okay. I hope that your answer to question 5 isn't as painful as the answer to question 4. So question 5 is, when was the last time a child taught you something about yourself that you didn't know?
Yes. Well, my children, now they are my guiding lights. And so I currently find myself in a situation where, I spend a lot of time on social media because that is where my business lies, and that is where my clientele lies, where, the work that I do with parents, it's all on social media. And, and to be honest, I also use social media, to get news and to get all that. And I use social media sometimes to escape, right? I think a lot of us do. We just kind of, when the world becomes too burdensome, we just tune out. And my daughter, who's 6, is just kind of emerging into reading. And I had been curious why, my son is an avid, voracious reader and was from the time he was 5 or 6. And I had been curious to why she hadn't really gravitated towards books. She likes read alouds, but she's never been really curious about books, and she can't really sit through a book. And then the other day I found a book for me that I've been completely engrossed in, right? And so I was sitting at the dining room table reading it. And my daughter looked at me, and then she walked over to her little basket of beginner readers, and she pulled out her book, and she came and she sat beside me. And that was the first time that she had done that.
Oh.
And I started thinking, like, well, this is really like the first time in a long time that she has seen me reading a book, like a physical book.
Yeah.
Right. She doesn't know that I'm on social media and I'm reading, or I'm, she doesn't know that. She just sees me doing this. Right. And so I was like, oh, modeling, right? It all goes back to, they're learning from us. They're learning from what we do. They want to be like us. And we need to be constantly aware of how our the messages that our behaviors are sending. Yeah. And so I've started putting my book on top of my cell phone, right? I have my cell phone charging, and now I'm putting my book on top of my cell phone so that when I go to get my cell phone in those moments of like, oh, I've got 5 minutes, let me see what's going on, I remember to pick up the book instead.
Nice. I love it.
So yes. So that's like, those little changes can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, these children.
Imbuing that love and pleasure in reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's, and just like
they reading, but they just see it on the phone. They don't see.
Yeah. They don't see a book, and they don't see you engrossed in a book, right? With a pencil and underlining, and, now she asked me why I write in my books. So now I have to, explain that
one, isn't it? Well, why are you allowed to write in your book, Mama, but I'm not? I'm like, right. That's a really good question. Let me come back to you on that one. Olivia just pulled me up on that recently. Why have you written in your book? We're not allowed to do that. Okay.
Exactly. So
if you've got a good answer for that one, let me know.
Yeah, still working on that one. Yeah. I mean, I think just showing them, right, the notes that you're taking are the important parts, and and yeah, and say I would never do this to a library book, and also maybe giving them the freedom to do that with one of their books, right? If there's interesting words that you want to underline with a pencil, allowing them to do that. I think they really force us to analyze what we do.
Yeah.
Right. And
analyze the ground rules, what.
Yes, exactly.
Why are we imposing this ground rule if we're not actually adhering it to ourselves?
Exactly. If we
sitting down whilst eating, you know, that's a big thing. It's like, Mama, well, you're standing up and eating that biscuit. Oh yeah, you're right, I am.
Yes, absolutely.
We have a family agreement that we all sit down to eat, but there's me wandering around eating whilst I'm telling everyone about the family agreement.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. I know it's terrible. And I think, you know, we do it, you know, we don't do it out of spite or malice, right? We do it because part of us wants to have that picture of perfection and discipline and everything. And then there's the other part of us that's just like, I can't be perfect. I need to just eat a piece of pie from the fridge. So
so true. That's great. Thank you. And question 6 is, when was the last time a child caught you out of integrity and questioned you on it?
Oh, yes. Well, again, my 6-year-old, she is, you know, she's entering the sensitive period or the sensitivity for morality, right? In the second plane. And so she is on it. She is on it. And she's fearless about questioning me, which is good, right? I'm really happy about that. I think I was too strict and too intransigent with my first child. You know, poor first children, they always get the brunt of our mistakes. And so I'm really happy to see that my second child is so outspoken. But one thing that happens that she called me out on was that whenever she asks me to play with her or, you know, to do something with her, to push her on the tire swing or whatever, I say yes, but I always say, let me do this other thing first. Right. And then she gets really irritated. You know, she says like, oh, that, you know, you always do something else first and you always make me wait. And that's not fair. And at first I thought it was, you know, I started thinking about like, well, why am I doing this? And at first I thought, well, it's because I'm so busy and I have such a long to-do list. And so I know I'm going to be busy with my child for a while. So let me just get something off my to-do list, right? But the reality, and I've worked through this in therapy really allowed me to see this in myself. The reality is that there is a part of me that is like that child that wants to be put first, that child whose needs want to come first, right? And doesn't want to put aside her needs to attend to the needs of somebody else. And when you're a parent, especially when you're in a homeschooling setting, you're always putting other people's needs first. And so her request is a reminder to my kind of wounded child that it actually exists. And so that's the moment when that child's like, no, wait a second. I also want to be put first. And so I've taken my daughter's requests as an opportunity to validate my inner child's need to be taken into account and to say, you know what? Yes, there will be time for you. It's okay. I see you. There will be time for you. And that is allowing me to just say yes without any conditioning, you know, without any condition, without any, like, let me do this first. Let me switch the laundry first. Let me make a coffee first, you know. It allows me to stay more present because I can take care of the child that's within me. So it's been a big gift, but it really took her getting angry and speaking out for me to see what was inside of me.
That is so beautiful, Pilar, and so thought-provoking. Thank you. That's really, really, really wonderful. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. As you say, you know, the inner child work is just transformative in itself. And in my own journey, if I share my experience, and I have the same with Olivia and Harry, and I noticed, because Olivia drew my attention to it, that if Harry asked for something, I would go almost immediately. But if she asked for something, I would say, let me just do this first. And that's been, and I'm still unpicking that. And I think I probably know what's underneath it, but it's very, very interesting, as you say, when we can observe and then start to pay attention and take care of our inner child, then it just changes everything. It changes our relationship with ourselves, it changes our relationship with our children, and it changes the way we interact with the outside world, because we're not becoming irritated with everyone doing their own thing, and everyone is operating from their inner child to a certain extent. But if we can give our inner child what she needs, then when we go out into the real world and people are getting annoyed with each other and people are cutting in the traffic and people are making you wait at the petrol station and people do get your order wrong, then your inner child isn't running the show as much, because you can just see that everyone else is just running around as wounded children as well, and it's okay because you're looking after yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And that is the gift that our children can give us if we're willing to look past our rationalizing, right? Because we can stay at the level of like, well, I'm busy and I have a lot to do. And if I'm going to be stuck pushing you on the tire swing for half an hour, then at least let me get this done, right? We can just stay at that level. And for some of us, that's where we are, and that's okay. But when we're ready to dig deeper, the gifts that we can receive when we're ready to dig deeper can be so transformative. And yes, like you said, they can allow us to be so compassionate, so much more compassionate in our daily lives with other people, because we're all going through this together.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. That was just such a reflective answer. Thank you. And so I'm not sure this next question kind of quite fits given our conversation, but question 7 would be, how did you explain yourself when you were out of integrity?
I've found that the best explanation is just to model doing things differently. And so I normally just say, if the child is right, and if there isn't like a misperception on the part of the child, because that is true too, right? They're 6, they're 4, they have a different perspective of the world than you do. And so sometimes you do have to just explain like, oh, well, I was actually doing this because this needed to be done XYZ, right? But when your child calls you out and you have the fortitude to really dig inside and see what's going on, just a simple, you're right, I'm sorry. And then modeling a different way of doing things, right, I think is more powerful than empty words. So that's what I've found kind of works to keep me honest with my children, is focusing on changing my actions in the long run. So,
and once we've had it shown to us so clearly by our children, it's just easier, isn't it? Just we know it's there, we know what's there, and we know what work we need to do, essentially.
Absolutely. And then I think that's the wonderful thing about having that connection with your child and that love that you have with your child, is that we don't want to hurt them, right? And so when they're showing us these parts of ourselves, that love allows us to say, yes, this is something that I commit to working on, right? And not just shoving it aside, because it's uncomfortable.
So true. So true. I love it. Thank you. So question 8 is a tricky one, because it is, what is your favorite Dr. Montessori quote? Very, very tricky at this moment in time, because it might change.
Right. Well, I actually found this quote years ago when I was starting, I think it was my second blog. And it's the child's parents are not his makers, but his guardians. And I find that kind of takes a lot of pressure off, right? Because, and it goes back to this idea that we were talking about at first, that there's this inner guide, right? And there's nature co-parenting with you, right? Co-guiding the child. And so we are just entrusted with taking care of this being that came through us, but is not ours. We didn't make the child, right? Consciously. They are a creation of nature, of God, of the universe, of source, of whatever you want to call it. And we're just here entrusted to guard their development. And then eventually they're going to move on, right? And
I love that. And which book is that from?
I honestly don't know. I know I saw it in a book years ago when I first read it, and I put it at the top of my blog because it just resonated so much with me. But I honestly don't know which one it comes from.
It's beautiful.
So yeah,
lovely. It reminds me of that Khalil Gibran poem. Your children are not your children. That one is just so gorgeous, isn't it? Exactly.
And it's such it aligns so well with the same idea. We didn't make them. We're just here to take care of them and hopefully not mess them up too much. And
guide them on their path.
Yeah, absolutely. And and we're just here to be models of what it's like to be an imperfectly perfect human being, right? We're just models of what it's like to go through life with its ups and downs, with its joys and sorrows. And so this idea that we have to be perfect or that we have to make them perfect is obviously, it's destructive at its worst, right? It's
really flawed. And in episode 4, when I was speaking to Trisha Moschino of the Keras tribe, she talked about this on and how it is a very colonialist thinking, actually, of this ridiculous, unattainable idea of perfection. And in the question about integrity, in question 6, she said, within the culture, the elders will say, I don't know everything. This is what I know in this point in time. And as you said, the imperfect perfection is actually celebrated. There isn't this ludicrous pressure that we have in the Western world to I guess, put the mask on, put the ego that we're perfect. And it's as you say, it's just nonsense when we think about it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's so destructive.
Really.
And limiting, right? It really limits creativity and absolutely.
And limits love, because we can't be open. How on earth can our hearts open if we're just watching the whole time for, how are people seeing me, or what are they going to think of me, or, we can't fully open in any sense, can we?
In any sense. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Pilar, for question 9, I would love to know, what is your deepest desire for Montessori for the future?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? I would love for it to just be a birthright for children and parents and adults in general, because we come into contact with children in so many different ways. So even if you're not a parent, understanding this new perspective or this different perspective on children can be transformative for all of society. And so I've always thought of, well, what if it didn't have a name? What if it didn't have the name Montessori, right? What if, how can it, because the name I mean, the name defines it, right? And so I use it because that's how I know people will find it, right? People who are looking for it, but the name limits it too, because in the in the way that Montessori is perceived, it's so limiting. It's perceived as materials and, as these cute little shelves with little themes and little trinkets
and inaccessible because it's just affluent middle class white people.
Absolutely.
So excludes a huge part if we look at it, as you say, just at that name.
Absolutely. And so it's a catch-22 because, without the name, how do you define it? But with the name, you limit it, right? So that's what, so that's what I would love for Montessori to become, right? I would love for it to be normalized as a path of growth for adults and children, as a way to respect children and empower adults, and just as principles for living, for living alongside. Because I think also, Montessori has the planes of development, but she could have gone farther, right? And I think anybody who has moved through early adulthood and into their 30s and 40s realizes that we go through more stages, right?
Early 40s. Oh my goodness, that was a wild ride, wasn't it?
Right. Oh my gosh, yes. And it has this kind of this same pattern as you see in early childhood and through adolescence and everything. And so wouldn't it be wonderful to continue that study of planes of development to help adults understand themselves better, right? Using these same principles. The principles are universal and the principles are timeless, right? They follow the child through into adulthood. But how fascinating for people to be able to see themselves in these planes and to better understand themselves. So that would be really fun.
Yeah, I love that. As you say, it to be so the norm that you don't actually have to use the name? That would be so amazing. Like, when you were saying that, the thing that sprung to mind to me, which is going to sound really bizarre, but do you remember when Prince was like at the height of his fame and like he wasn't called Prince anymore? He was the symbol.
Just the symbol, yeah.
And everyone, because he was so... It was so incredible in everything that he did. He didn't actually need a name anymore. This is a really bizarre parallel to draw, but this is what sprung to mind. We're like, the Montessori movement is like Prince, it's like you shouldn't need to give it a name or a label because it should just be, everyone knows what it is. But what I find with the parents I work with is, lots of them will say, well, where are the parallels? Or this sounds like conscious parenting. Where are the parallels with conscious parenting? And I'm like, well, it's basically the same, but just, Dr. Shafali writes it in a more modern way. Basically is sort of largely when we're talking about the parenting side of Montessori, it's being aware that our child is our teacher, and we need to remove the ego in order to see who the child is they really are. And so you're right, it can become, I think, universal and the norm, but maybe we just need to give it a different title so that it seems more accessible to people.
I think what would be wonderful is if we didn't even have to worry about what to call it, right? If it were just common knowledge, if it were just truth, right? Because it is. And what's so powerful about Montessori is that, about the principles, is that they come from observation, right?
Yeah.
And there have been many educational theories that come from somebody's idea of how things should be, right? And they're very honorable, right? They're all people who wanted to change the world for the better,
Yeah.
and to help children. But to have principles that come from pure observation, right? It makes it so that we shouldn't even have to call it anything. All we need to do, like, it's really quite simple. All we need to do is help people see it in their children, right? Unfortunately, you know, in our society, commercialist society, everything has to have a label. Everything has to have a,
You're right. Yeah.
a name for it to be considered valid and acceptable, and for people to embrace it. And so that's what's kept the name Montessori, you know, attached to it. And again, that's also what limits it.
Yeah.
So I think just, you know, keep writing, keep speaking, and keep sharing. And yeah, I think as parents embrace these ideas, they will become more mainstream. We all want to better understand our children. We all want an approach that allows us to be more human.
Yeah.
And these principles, and these
Be more
principles,
human.
yeah.
A more peaceful and harmonious world. And there's no one that can argue. Would you like a more peaceful and harmonious world? Everyone wants that. This is a path to do that. And you can call it Montessori, or you don't need to call it Montessori, but this is what we're doing. Do you want to? Yeah. No, I love that. And I love how you said that it's pure observation. It's not based on someone else's opinion. And that was the whole, and circling back to what we said at the beginning, it's Dr. Montessori's gift that she gave us, was that everyone has the power to see this within their child and with everyone else's child. It's nothing more than observation. We don't need to do a course or our children to go to Montessori school. The child tells us everything we need to know, and that's what the gift is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's really wild is that the whole idea of normalization, right? Dr. Montessori in The Observant Mind, she writes that normalization was the most important result of her work, right? It was a result. She didn't set out to normalize children. Normalization happened. Normalization happened. She observed it as she made little changes to the environment, to the preparation of the adults. All of that led to the normalization of the children. And we are constantly taking the opposite approach. You know, when I was talking about working at schools, there was this push towards normalization. It was, you know, your classroom needs to be normalized by November. So then normalization becomes an extrinsic goal, right?
Yeah.
It becomes something to push the children towards, as opposed to a phenomenon that occurs when all the conditions are right. So it's our, you know, just like we try to manipulate everything in life, you know, we try to manipulate birth, we try to manipulate health, we try, you know, we try to manipulate children. And one of the things that I would love to see is for schools and heads of schools and guides to, and parents, you know, once they understand this process, to see normalization as something that is reached, not something that is created, you know, something that is artificially forged.
Sort as an outcome.
And you know, because that's where all the no's start, right? Like, no, you shouldn't do this because this is not what's going to lead to normalization. And you shouldn't do this other thing because, as opposed to just creating conditions and allowing it to happen.
And I think when we read the text, we can become confused about that. We're looking for signs of normalization when we should just be letting our children be children. And actually, I had a message from one of my clients today who I'm working with, and her daughter is 4, and she was saying about how we were talking because her daughter doesn't want to do things or activities with her at home. She just wants to do play. And I was like, well, let her play. She just needs to play. And she said, oh, you really transformed my view of this, because I was looking for normalization and I was getting so angry and frustrated because I wanted normalization. She just wanted to do pretend play. And then it becomes another unattainable and unhealthy goal. And then also normalization can be misinterpreted that as a child who never has a tantrum. It's this obedient wonder child who never has a tantrum, or which is just so, or never is rude or behaves and never spits, all these things. Or Harry's going through a spitting stage at the moment.
Oh, love it.
Like, do you remember that stage with your son? It's just like, and it sends you into like a different stratosphere of like your conditioning of how you responded to when you spat as a child. And I'm like, sometimes I just don't know what to do, because I think I'm going to come out with the wrong response here, so I just have to just do nothing. It's so interesting, isn't it? And it's, you can't be normalized if you're spitting, and you think,
right. Yeah, no. And I think, two things. One, normalization is not constant. It's not, it's not solid. Like there are ebbs and flows, and there are things that happen in a child's life that will shift them into a state of normalization or out of a state of normalization. Normalization is a state, right? Just like you're in a state of health or a state of illness, and it goes back and forth. Well, the same thing happens with the child, with normalization. And I think that it was interesting that you used the phrase looking for signs of normalization, when what we really ought to be doing is looking for signs of sensitive periods and human tendencies, right? Because when we guide and support those sensitive periods and those human tendencies, the result becomes normalization. Right? Without us focusing on normalization. So it's like we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're focusing on the end, when what we should be focusing is on the conditions that will naturally lead the child towards that higher state of being.
I'm so glad we went off on this tangent about normalization. It's brilliant, because as you say,
one of my favorite topics. Yeah.
If we look for signs of normalization, then we're almost setting our child up to fail, aren't we? It's a test, isn't it? It's like,
it's digging up the seeds.
Yeah.
It's digging up to the seeds to see if they're growing. And what do? You kill them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it. And so question 10, not that I want this interview to end, but question 10 is our last one, is what do you see as your role in achieving your deepest desire for Montessori?
I think what has really been speaking to me has been to lead through example. And by that, I don't mean, be the perfect shining example of Montessori, but quite the contrary. I share my struggles, talk about how I work on myself, speak about and share some of my children's opportunities for growth and the things they're discovering and their own struggles. Because I really think that's the only way that the people who have a misperception of Montessori as this kind of perfect, pristine little method, right, of teaching children. I think that's how they can connect more with Montessori. If they see, oh, okay, here's this person that has been immersed in Montessori all their lives, and they still have a messy kitchen, and they still get angry, and they still mess up the lesson, and they're still cutting materials while setting up the lesson, like all of this messiness. Then they can say, okay, maybe Montessori is for me, right? Maybe these principles are something I can embrace. And so letting go of that perfection, being vulnerable, letting go of that image that social media wants you to have, is what I strive for. And I've found that it resonates with parents who are ready to do the work. Right. So that's kind of my goal right now, is to just be myself and help others know that there are many ways to Montessori, right? It's been quite the journey so far.
I can imagine. That is so lovely, Pilar. What a way to finish. Thank you. And sharing the magic in the ordinary of our lives. That's actually one of my affirmations. And that's what I see in what you share, is you just show the magic in the ordinary, because this is what daily life is like. And this is, as you say, the messy bits and the vulnerable bits and the bits where I get it wrong. And then these are the amazing moments as well, when we, play on the tire swing and climb trees. But it's all part of the realness and the rawness of it. And I think that you're right. That's why it's of such value for parents, because they see it resonates. Yeah, this might be for me. I don't need to be perfect, and I don't need to be a super mummy, and I don't need to, or super daddy, and I can have a messy kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I never thought that I would work with parents like that. When I was working with children in the classroom, that was my biggest struggle, was working with parents, because I think this whole like parent, child, teacher triangle can be extremely messy. But now that I'm working with parents without the children, it's been so fascinating to see, like I said, like they're going through their own planes of development as parents. They have their sensitive periods. And so to be able to guide them, it's very reflective of, how in the classroom, oftentimes children learn better from other children than they do from the adult, right? Because the older child has just walked that path. So it's fresh, it's approachable. The younger child can see, well, they just did it, so now I know that I'll be able to do it. And so that's how I see, your role and my role as kind of, parents who are walking maybe one step ahead, and just modeling and sharing with the parents that are ready.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pilar. And what would you like to share with us about what you're doing at the moment? What's close to your heart at the moment you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, well, yes, thank you. So my online membership community is the Montessori Homeschool Hub, and we are launching, it's been around for over a year. So we're about a year and a half. And so we're going into this new school year. And so I'm really excited about that, because we have a beautiful online community with parents, mostly moms, who are homeschooling, and they love to share what's going on in their lives. And together we kind of normalize this kind of crazy adventure that we're all on. So I'm really excited to see everything that parents are going to be bringing into the hub. It's obviously, me teaching and sharing, but it's also parents reflecting back the what's the word? I lost the word. They reflect back the good things, the gifts that come out of putting in the work. So it's so lovely to see that. And I know a lot of parents are saying, I need curriculum and, what am I going to do without curriculum? But those albums can be so overwhelming. So, on my website, I have the timeline, and, parents can go on the website at mainlymontessori.com, and there are tons of resources there. There's free videos, free downloads, membership. There's a Facebook group, a free Facebook group, Second Plane Montessori, where I share with parents, and lots of other Montessorians share with parents and with each other how to better understand our second plane children and how to better support them. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. And finally, the retreat that you were talking about that we just finished, I'm going to be making it available for purchase on the website coming in September. And so if you missed it over the summer, but you want to get all of that goodness, the 8 weeks of videos and the 8 recorded group calls, plus all the downloads and the workbook and everything, it's all going to be available as of September and on the website. So all of
and
that.
I can vouch for it. There's so much. It's a gold mine of information. Pilar's website and within the hub and within the retreat. So I can't recommend it highly enough, really. And it's really, really, really of so much value. So definitely mainlymontessori.com, go and check it out, everyone. I highly, highly recommend it.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love, and it's evolved into something beyond my wildest dreams. And so I'm just excited and grateful for everybody that's coming along on this ride with me.
It's amazing. Pilar, thank you so much for answering all of our 10 questions today. And this is episode 7 of the Montessori Mission, and we'll be looking forward to the book that's coming out of the Montessori Mission, which is scheduled for November, if I can draw everything together in time, which is a big project, bigger than I could have imagined, but it's really, really exciting, and I think it's the right time to do so. So thank you so much for being part of the podcast, and then the bigger picture as well for the book.
Thank you.
And thank you all, everyone, for joining me and Pilar today. And looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Montessori Mission. 10 Montessorians, 10 questions, 10 perspectives from 10 different communities. Pilar has been our homeschooling Montessori champion for this episode. And thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. And I'll speak to you very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thanks, Pilar. Bye-bye.
Bye.